Hello and welcome back to the channel. LC here, your distinguished guide to all things triangle strategy. So you probably noticed there's no video introduction today because today is the day. We have the final tier list discussion. Who is good, who is bad, and most importantly, where are we going to rank Roland? This will be more of a streamlined analysis of each character's strengths, as we've already had several hour-long guides for the entire cast. I don't want to risk being overly repetitive, and I would like a more concise style for this conversation. As usual, if you are new here and enjoy triangle strategy and RPG content, please make sure you like, comment, subscribe, and join our Discord for more triangle discussion as well as RPG content. Okay, let's get into it. Now let's go over some credentials because we all like those. Currently just shy of 120 hours with a total of 6 playthroughs under my belt, including at least one hard mode and one hard mode new game plus. Now this definitely doesn't make me beyond reproach when it comes to any of my replacements or opinions, and there's bound to always be some measure of bias depending on any type of tier list based off your current playstyle type. So with that being said, let's start off with our hero Serrana. Now Serrana has a pretty decent kit that kind of comes alive once you start upgrading his weapon class and character class. Things like increased hawk dive range and the low-key insanely good shielding stance elevate this man to an easy A tier. Solid attack and defense and an overall decent toolkit. He's just shy of S tier because he doesn't have anything truly game-breaking as an individual unit, and is just a definition of a super solid all-rounder. And then moving on to Roland, actually we're going to skip this man for now and come back to him. It's way too early in the morning for all that. Old man Benedict, this character also comes in at an A tier, although on a slightly lower tier than his son. Yes, I said Serrana is his son. I mean, look at this and tell me these two aren't related. This is my headcanon and I'm sticking by it. Being one of the 4 gods of synergy, Benedict pairs well with the entire cast, and the initial TP plus that he gets as well as the Vanguard Scarf and the Dragon Shield combination is absolutely broken, and this is a perfect way to start off most rounds. Also, the man's defense and speed are also quite solid as well. Depending on your playstyle, there's definitely a good argument for him to be potentially lower or higher depending on how you actually get around to using him, but for me, he's an easy A tier. Now we have young Freddy in the cut. Frederica is one of the most solid damage dealers in the entire game, and that tied with her ability to set tiles ablaze on most maps, and hell, actually all the maps if you're using an oil jug combination. She is a force to be reckoned with at almost all times. That kind of screen control is invaluable on some of the higher difficulties. Her DPS ability, tied with the brilliant TP recovery on knockout, effortlessly lands her in the upper elos of A tier. She does suffer from some of the same faults as most mages, but proper positioning and defense are going to be key to having her shine throughout the battles. And moving on to Gila, one of the 2 peer healers that you get throughout the cast. Now I personally believe that Gila is an easy A. Once you get Miraculous Light, she completely evolves as a character. I'm talking about going from a Dragonair to a Dragon Knight type levels. However, in hard mode and New Game Plus, I could certainly see an argument being made for her being a bit lower at B tier, as the utility of characters such as Cordelia and Medina become much more prominent. For now, A tier is where I have her clocked. Moving into Lord Anna. My favorite character in the entire game, she is a right menace in standard and normal mode playthroughs. However, in New Game Plus and hard mode, her utility does a complete 180. Would you believe me if I said you have to actually play her like an assassin? Your ability to infiltrate the enemy's ranks and avoid damage while dishing out criticals will make or break how you feel about her. Some people flat out don't like this playstyle, and that's somewhat understandable. If utilized properly, she could hit the upper elos if you are a meticulous tactician, but for most players outside of normal mode, she ends up sitting at a very solid B+ tier when everything shakes out. Now KO, you said that she was one of the best characters in the game in this video. Opinions update and change over time, and nothing is ever going to be set in stone. This is always going to be a constantly updating and evolving list. And then moving on to our Hawk Knight Hewett, very much in the same category as her predecessor Anna, an absolute god in normal mode for the majority of the playthrough. Her maneuverability and status effects come in clutch in numerous story-based levels. However, once you get to some of the higher difficulties, her utility essentially is totally predicated around her ability to gimp the enemy team with blinding arrow and shadow stitching. Her strength is rarely high enough to be the deciding blow outside of maybe Shooting Star, so depending on your playstyle, her role may change entirely. Also, her sentry mode with set sights is actually pretty good, don't sleep on that. Overall, got her at B+ tier, maybe even an A on a good day. And then moving on to Big Papa Pump, yeah I said it, our first S tier character in the ranks, Eridor. When utilized properly, this man can withstand damn near everything in this game, and that's not counting any additional broken accessories you might elect to add to him. Provoke, Desperate Defense, and King's Shield are the holy trinity of defensive maneuvers, and would pair with any of the 4 synergy gods, this man becomes a right unmovable object that requires a ton of resources to be slayed. The thing about Eridor is that he only gets better the higher you raise the difficulty. There have been so many times in New Game Plus and hard mode when he was one of my final units and was able to clutch out the match due to either Provoke or King Shield, and in the end, an S tier character is S tier. Homeboy's dick is just long, what else can I say? Moving on to the red-nosed reindeer known as Rudolph. This man was actually one of my favorite characters in my first 2 playthroughs. However, the moment the game inched into higher difficulties, his weaknesses became exceedingly glaring. His movement and range at max levels are a little sus for my taste, and despite Straight Shot being one of the game's best and most damaging moves, I found that his moveset seemed to kind of be at odds with each other, as is the issue with most generalists in this game. He doesn't exactly excel at one thing or another, and other characters eclipse him handily in the end. B tier is where I got him. Hell, at least his in-game portrait absolutely kicks ass. And moving on to Mr. Freeze, Corentin, essentially a worse version of Frederica, although I think at times having ice on the ground is better than having squares ablaze, as it can be done on any stage, and its defensive utility, when paired with something like Wall of Ice, is broken in some situations. His biggest issue is that he requires TP on ice in order to have a steady TP stock, so this limits his ability to continuously move forward unless he's paired with Giovanna or a character that can consistently throw those ice stones out for him. A very strong compelling argument could be made for him to be A tier in certain cases, but B+ is where I have him from now. Now we have Julio, the game's second best TP battery and a modest damage dealer to boot. Julio, being one of the 4 gods of synergy, pairs well with the entire cast, and you can always find a spot for him on your roster. I think he could easily edge out A tier if it wasn't for the existence of this little lady right here, which ultimately led to him becoming redundant late game, as she can fill this role more efficiently while healing as well. A true victim of circumstance, B tier. And then moving on, we have my wife Milo. No, I won't be taking any questions about that statement there. Milo is our second S tier rank due to her incredible movement, evasion options, as well as her incredible weapon skill, Power of Love. This type with Heartstealer makes her a game-changing force at almost all times on the battlefield. Her magic defense, also being quite high, allows her to kite mages as well, and gives her access to the fray with proper positioning and decision making. God, it's a woman after all. Okay, now on to Cordelia, our other dedicated mage in this game. Her skill set is on par with Gila's in pretty much every way. It really just comes down to a matter of preference between regen and auto life, and above and beyond usage. Outside of that, they're pretty much similar in every way you could think of. Although I do think that Elude has a bit more utility than Haste in this game. Her weapon skill alone elevates her to A tier when unlocked. However, that is contingent with being paired with a TP battery. Without it, I could easily see her going down to B tier, but for now, we got her in A. The big boss Travis. Actually a pretty solid attacker, and modest physical and magic defense makes Travis a very solid character overall. In my opinion, the biggest drawback is that there are just better melees. Characters like Serrana, Maxwell, and Eridor just offer more and bring much more to the table overall. Travis just exists to just kind of hit things, making his playstyle overall much more linear. Like father, like daughter, Trish is another character that excels in things that don't end up mattering too much, such as stealing items or picking up spoils from drops. Her X factor is Act Again, which is much more of an utility action unless you've set up a pincer attack with damage via arrows. Her damage is only really serviceable at best. Her movement and speed are good, and Leap has its uses, but with a lower evasion stat, she will still be getting hit more often than not. Overshadowed by characters like Archibald and Hewett, I think she sits right alongside Rudolph in B tier. Fire Arrow is nice though. And moving on to my other wife, General Evlora. Yeah, we got one of those polyamory things going on. Mind your business. This the best physical attacker in the game. Once she gets rolling, she is a right freight train of pain after getting her passive Prevail and power up after slaying one enemy. This tie with the red anklet makes her Zaraki Kenpachi on the battlefield, as she really can't be tested outright by most opponents outside of boss characters. The only major drawback is her strongest attacks do a decent amount of damage to herself, though having her in proximity to a healer is a must if you wish to maximize her efficiency. S tier. Yes, Hassabaro. Quite possibly one of the most contentious characters discussion-wise after Roland. Being a generalist, you really have to commit and decide to her playstyle. And the good news is that she has all the things necessary in order to be a solid addition to any team. Be Brave has decent application, and if you can get her moving on the map, trekking for TP definitely comes in handy, but really I find her 2 final abilities, Desperate Defense and Catapult, are really what sets her apart. She can definitely take a hit and be a meat shield when properly augmented, and she can provide buffs via Catapult. In my heart of hearts, I honestly don't think anybody in this game that has Desperate Defense can honestly be anything below an A tier. It's that game changing in a pinch. And then on to the great sage Narv. Actually, I don't think he's quite that great, to be honest. Another victim of the generalist trope, his versatility comes at cost of raw strength and DPS. The best thing he has going for him are pierce defenses, which is only good when paired with another mage, and then he still has to go first in order to use it efficiently. and extending your reach, which is good when attempting to keep him safe. Just keeping it real out there is really no reason to utilize this character outside of the fact that you like him. He's eclipsed effortlessly by all other mages in both utility and strength. B tier. You ever had a girlfriend you always had to take shopping all the time, and she knew every time it was your payday, and you would have to go to the mall looking crazy every Friday? That girl grew up to be Mina, our item specialist in the world of Norzelia. The best TP battery in the game's hands down and the best utility healer. The only drawback to her is that she's going to hurt your pockets, like a lot, if you haven't been taking time to supplant your coffers. That aside, I have her in God tier, the only current resident that we have on this list so far. She actually completely erases a few characters from the game like Julio, and makes you start looking at a few of your dedicated healers with a bit of a side eye. God tier item user is God tier. On to Lord Jens. One of the best raw utility characters in the game. His strategy is easily executed, and once you have Springtrap down to 2 TP per usage, he can rival S tier characters when paired with ladder centric stages. The only thing I think that keeps Jens from pure greatness is his slightly suspect strength and magic defense stat. If he isn't putting down traps, he's kinda just sitting there breathing air, unless you manage to get a lucky slumber strike off. Also, his weapon skill is probably one of the biggest disappointments in the game after Izana's A tier. Maxwell, the god, the fresh prince of Norzelia. I mean, look at this absolutely dripped outfit. This is one of my favorite characters to utilize in game, and his kit makes it all the easier to get into the sauce on the battlefield. One of the most complete and versatile attackers in the game, he synergizes well in front, mid, and even backline when necessary. Attacks like run through are excellent to close out enemies, and he only gets dumber when you unlock stuff like revive. You can afford to play him recklessly and actually suffer no consequences. And just like Eridor, he shines much brighter when you crank up the difficulty. Easy S tier character. And then on to Old Man Archie, one of the best raw damage dealers in the game, and probably one of the best haste users in the game as well. Honestly, in normal mode, this character is S tier due to Inescapable Arrow, which offers absolutely broken utility that can swing the pendulum your way with ease in each match. His range and DPS is also incredible once leveled up, and his critical based passives allow him to put down enemies all over the map. There's a bit of a stricter fall off in some of the higher difficulties when utilizing him, as your damage mileage won't go nearly as far. A tier. Good job, Gramps. Ah yes, Lord Flanagan. There has been much to do about this man's utility and placement in most tier lists. I'm actually part of the crowd that has warmed up significantly regarding his toolset and utility. Fortify and Rampart are both invaluable skills, and when paired with Serrana's shielding stance, things start to get kinda hilarious, guys. The fact that he works so well with our hero, and you're required to have said hero in all matches, makes Flanagan substantially more valuable as a character. The thing is that you have to be extremely careful with his positioning, as he not only has to look out for mages like every other tank, but with Hawksbane he has to also look out for archers, making his versatility much better on paper than in practice. B+ tier. If you would have caught me a month ago, this man would have been in last place, but fortune has smiled upon the bloody shield. Izana, my third wife. Yeah, we got one of those Magic Johnson situations going on, don't judge me.
Like I said, women have different fantasies. Some want to be with 2, 3 at a time. You know, one time I had 6 at one time.
My main mage with Freddy during my first 2 runs is actually the mage I use the least now. Despite Rite of Lightning still being absolutely insane when tied with Rite of Rain, over time I found that her setup to be increasingly tedious and counterintuitive on certain maps, and her somewhat situational crowd control left me wanting on more than one occasion. Lack of TP recovery and a suspect weapon skill, yes, I still think it's bad, even with the Quahog time stop cheese strategy. This actually had me electing to bring either Frederica or Corentin along instead in most cases. Yes, lightning paralysis combo is absolutely busted in this game, but it's also situational unless you consistently take time to set it up. B tier. On to the colonizer known as Lionel. They gave a money-grubbing merchant a whip as a weapon. They knew what they were doing. This is actually one of my favorite characters to use, and although his kit doesn't really start to blossom until late game for his promotions for his weapon skills as well as his character rank, once he gets it, he's an absolute menace. Golden Opportunity is the best weapon skill in this game. Doing absurd damage and a chance to tempt is just really too good. Endless Speech is also a terrific stall tactic. However, both of these are TP intensive attacks, so if you want to use Lionel as efficiently as possible, a TP battery is an absolute must. A+ tier. Oh yes, Grandma Groma, one of my least utilized characters in this game. Her kit being built around evasion, I think is one of those things that's only really real on paper. While she definitely has the highest value in the game, with the potential for it to only soar higher with augments, her issue is that she can't take a hit. With 420 HP, the second lowest value in the game, having her on the field becomes increasingly risky at higher difficulties, as she can almost be damn near one shot with the greatest of ease. On the upside, once she gets rolling with things like Eliminate Invade, it's very good, as well as Skyward Fist for dealing with pesky elevated mages, but all of this together isn't nearly enough to overcome her weaknesses. B tier, maybe even C tier on a bad day. Now someone left a very interesting comment talking about pairing her with Corentin and Giovanna in order to keep ice on the field, which also lowers the enemy's accuracy. Just spitballing here, I'm open to thoughts down in the comments, but for now, B tier. Pico. Yes, Miss Pikaletta, the worst unit in this game. She has one utility and she can't even do that well. Decoy costing 3 TP with no chance to reduce and no TP recovery means she needs access to a TP battery at almost all times. If not, she really is just an empty character slot. This is an incomplete and almost at times curiously balanced character. Like seriously, why is her speed only 27? She's literally the most petite character in the game carrying a racket. Why is she not the fastest character in the game by a long shot? P tier for Pikaletta. If Decoy isn't out on the field, she's just breathing air and taking up a character slot. Moving on to Decimal, the little wheelbarrow that could. This character, like Flanagan, is one that really grew on me as time passed. He really starts to shine in higher difficulties, and in hard mode, he is a definition of clutch on certain maps. Decimal is almost entirely dictated by chance, so if you don't like that, he's probably not a good choice for you. But for someone who enjoys a bit of risk in life, I fully appreciated his utility. Also, he gets a free buff with Black Anklet, A tier. And moving on to the Time Whiz Kid Quahog, God tier. There really isn't much to say that I haven't said about this character already. He's utterly game breaking on every level. Turn back time, stop time, and reverse space time are contenders for the best abilities in the game hands down. Any character that allows you to play risky and still fix your mistakes in a tactical game is absolute gold. He even has pretty excellent speed and movement as well, allowing him to be in the fray as necessary. The only thing that holds Quahog back, honestly, is the player imagination. And I still contest we haven't even seen the most broken things he can do yet. And to cap us all off, we have Giovanna, one of the most hotly debated characters in the entirety of the cast. Most people find her to be on the lower side of the spectrum. I have to disagree with that, as I don't think that she's anywhere near Groma or Pikaletta tier. However, she does require a pairing of either a dedicated item Stone Tosser or Corentin in order to be a truly capable character on the field. This layer of setup may not be for everyone, but I found that her DPS ability when paired with trekking for TP gave me all the ammo I needed for her to be a completely solid character. B tier, although an argument could be made for A when fully optimized and committed to her setup strat. And that's going to do it for this end-all be-all tier list of Triangle Strategy. There most certainly won't be other tier lists made by other creators that are vastly different, and I definitely won't change my mind on half of these placements in my next playthrough. Like I said, definitive. Oh wait, I think we're forgetting something. Ah yes, young Prince Roland. I think people really love this character. He's in not so many words the whole reason many people cherish this game and love having him out on the battlefield. Okay, jokes aside, let's keep it funky for just a second. Most people don't like Roland because they flat out aren't using him correctly. I, like many other players that might have come from a tactical based background, felt young Roland was absolute ass late game and virtually unusable. The key here is not to attempt to use him like a Fire Emblem type cavalry, but instead a bit more like a mobile ninja type from Final Fantasy Tactics, an opportunist for critical attacks and flash of steel usage. He's not really meant for the front lines, and with opportune attack, the idea is to keep this man mobile and out of danger. Dish it out but not get hit. This can be difficult depending on your playstyle, so in the end he's not going to be everybody's cup of tea, but he's very far from a bad character, A tier. And that's going to do it. Thanks for checking out the channel, and make sure you subscribe and keep it locked here for more Triangle Strategy and JRPG content. LC signing out, peace.